Hey everybody, it's me, the Einstein on Wall Street from the balcony at the New York Stock Exchange. This is Trade Like Einstein for Money News Network. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the beginning of the fourth quarter. This market is trading at record highs. We are in the midst of a time unmatched in history. We are in the midst of an AI revolution in absolutely every industry possible. I'm going to go back to think about when you were a little kid. I don't know if it's all boys and girls and however you identify yourself, but I remember when I was a kid, I loved playing with trucks. I loved transportation. I loved having a little car set that would riding around my house. I loved that whole thing. And also in my later incarnation, and I've been around for a long time, I love logistics and I love the whole mindset of doing things in an efficient fashion, right? Whether it's food industry, whether it's transportation industry, whatever it is. And you know I love to bring you the top of the top, the groundbreaking, breaking the ceiling in every industry possible. I brought you food, finance, fun, fashion, all that kind of stuff, and I brought you some of the highest level technology. We know my man Dan Ives, and we're going to talk about AI because he is the man. We're going to talk about the role that AI plays within the transportation network, within that industry. Look, we've got all kinds of companies here listed on the stock exchange within that industry, but I'm going to bring you somebody today. Company is about to go public. They are the most groundbreaking, in my opinion. The people, the product, the profitability, and the placement is extraordinary. And that's what I love to bring you. Look, there are a lot of companies that are just sort of, you know what, they're in their mode, but they are not stepping up to the plate and doing things. We are in an ever-evolving world that's happening at a pace that is extraordinary. Think about it. We can be in a bear market at 11 o'clock in the morning and a bull market by 3:30 in the afternoon. We need people, we need companies, we need technology that can keep up with that kind of acceleration. And I think we may have found it here within the transportation space. I'm going to happily introduce you to my man, Andrew Sobko of Batch. There's a lot to tell about his story. We're going to ravel it. We're going to unravel it. We're going to tell the evolution of him in this industry, him as a big player in the game, him as a human being, levels of confidence, where he's come from, what he's doing now, and what does the future look like. Welcome to the Stock Exchange, Trade Like Einstein.
Thank you, Peter.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So we're here on the floor of the Stock Exchange. We know that technology, transportation, AI are really, are things that are so necessary, but at the height of it all is the efficiency. As I mentioned in the beginning, how do we take technology and incorporate it into the business we're doing? How do we take the levels of efficiency necessary to really be a major player in the game? We are in a time now, especially post-COVID, and that's something I want to talk to you about too, because from the logistics point of view, in a post-COVID world, I know that was one of the biggest problems that we had, that caused, one of the biggest causes, one of the components surely that caused the inflation story. So please tell us about you, tell us about your business, give me a little breakdown.
Yeah, sure. Thanks again for having me.
My pleasure.
So quick background on Batch. So Batch is a tech-enabled logistics brokerage firm. We're focusing on the most complicated piece of supply chain. It's called first mile drayage. So what we did initially, we digitized the whole experience when you're getting containers out of the ports.
Right.
And we were always very focused from day one, how can we simplify our customer experience? Right. And then how can we actually increase our drivers' productivity? Which I can proudly mention, we actually accomplished that. So from our early days when we started back in 2018, we were able initially to digitize about 54,000 lanes, and we're on very accurate forecast. And now we're at the point where we digitized 110,000 lanes that exist in the trucking industry. And on the truckers' end, we have an app which we have tens of thousands of truck drivers use our app.
Right.
We were able, in some cases, increase drivers' productivity. Instead of doing on average 2 runs a day out of, let's say, a major port like Los Angeles and Long Beach, up to 6 runs a day, which is significant accomplishment for us.
So let's talk about it so that people may not understand what we're talking about. So think about it. You wake up in the morning, you sit down, you have a cup of coffee, you have your bacon, egg, and cheese, whatever it is, and you go about your day, right? All the things that are involved in our day-to-day life are all about products and consumption. We're the greatest consumer generation in the world. We want what we want when we want it. But we don't often think about, how did it get there? How did that sausage get on your patty? How did that coffee arrive in your house? How did the lumber that built that house that you're living in get there? How did that car get built? How did the technology that's inside of your car get from wherever it was made into the car to the factory and then to you? Think about that, right? That is I mean, that's unbelievable. I mean, and that's something that gets my juices flowing. I love that idea to think about how did things get to where they are, from where they are, but how does the logistics work? And think about that. Look, you're talking. You could go back to the beginning of time. You could go back to to cowboys and Indians. You could go back to when the prairie land. How did somebody? I was mentioning to Andrew, we're here on the balcony at the Stock Exchange, outside of this building in New Amsterdam in 1650. There used to be people called the Buttonwood Group. The Buttonwood Group would be a bunch of young brokers in the 1600s that would take their wheelbarrows when the boats would arrive here at the port in New York, and it's so apropos that we're doing that. So they would go to the port from here on Wall Street. They would go down to the port with their wheelbarrows, pick up whether it was tobacco, whether it was lumber, whether it was spices, bring it up to the buttonwood tree, and then wheel it and deal it, right? And then think about how that got disseminated around the country, around the city, wherever it was. Back then, there was Wall Street, which was a wall. Beyond Wall Street was a forest. So how do things get to where they're going? And then we're living in this world of such an accelerated pace that think about, so what Andrew is describing is a company that's taking things come into a port. Let's just get really basic. Let's do the breakdown here. Things come into the port of in San Francisco, whatever the main port is, right? And so, excuse me a second. There are trains and there are tractor trailers that are going to pick up merchandise and bring it around the country. Then you have to understand, he talked about thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of lanes, right? So I need people to really understand, because for me it's incredibly fascinating, and I love the whole story. Things are transported all over the world to different places where the necessity is. Then how do you get it in an efficient fashion? Think about, I'm a trucker, right? I have an 18-wheeler truck, and my business is, in the most efficient way possible, is to pick up merchandise, fill my wagon with the most stuff I can, and then drive it in the most efficient place to the place I need to make the most money. You mentioned it. Somebody used to be able to do 2 rides a day. Now they can do 6 rides a day, right? The port, probably before the technology and the AI, was probably a completely confusing, crazy place to be. And now you've basically been able to make a port, make the logistics of the trucks, of the trains, of the boats, of the containers, of all of that into a point where it's incredibly efficient and works beautifully.
Yeah, absolutely. So our always focus was to simplify it. And just to give some examples from our customer base, it's from companies that import bananas to America, to different other food companies, from Nestle, PepsiCo, auto parts, retail. So all the largest retailers, like Walmart, Target, import most of their goods to America through the ports. And that's our specialty. So I'll give you a couple examples. So whenever, let's say, truck driver, even until today, we still see many cases today, typical, let's say, trucking company arrives at the port, driver shows up at the box, he has, let's say, some piece of paper, and he goes and he needs to get in a container, which he's not always know exactly where the container is going. And whenever driver has any challenges, issues, he needs to call his dispatcher in the office, who could be miles or hundreds of miles away from him, and that guy trying to solve his problems.
And he's also got 100 other people calling him also.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we simplified and fully digitized this process. We kind of like created like an Uber experience, or it's very similar to DoorDash experience. So large shipper, let's say like John Deere or Nestle, he can sit in front of his computer and he can see in real time, like where, let's say he imported 10,000 containers, they all arrived at one port for this week. And he can see full digital experience of those thousands of containers whenever they're getting out of the ports in this full digital experience. Very simple, very similar like you order food through DoorDash.
So, for me, I find that incredibly exciting. For me, the fact that, so tell us about the whole evolution of the company. Where did you start? You're from Ukraine. Give me a little bit, what was your motivator as a kid? Talk to me, give me Andrew Sobko at the age of 16.
So my story is, when I was young, I was 16, 17 years old, I was fortunate enough to move to Fresno, California. I was very passionate about stock trading.
Oh, you were?
And I was 100% convinced I'm going to go work for one of the major top firms, Goldman, Morgan Stanley. That was my mission. I was very passionate about trading, money management. And at some point, I was fortunate enough to move to Los Angeles for a couple of weeks. And I was offered, I had a friend in Chicago who texted me. He's like, why don't you come to Chicago? It's summertime. Let's check it out. It's a beautiful city. And he said, I have a friend who's in Los Angeles. He can give you a free ride to Chicago from Los Angeles. I'm like, why not? So when I took the ride, in front of me, this truck driver was on the phone negotiating with his customer, which was a broker. He was negotiating a price for the shipment.
Right.
And in front of me, within like 2 hour window, this driver negotiated $2,000 extra price with the broker.
Right.
There was no index, no logic behind this.
Right.
Just was Friday afternoon. His customer got a little bit desperate.
Right.
Zero logic, and he squeezed additional $2,000 price from him.
Right.
For me, it was mind blowing.
Yeah.
I started questioning myself. This is like, somebody needs to digitize it. Same like stock market was digitized again back in 80s, 90s.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to bring technology and just find a way to digitize it. So, time goes by, I moved to Chicago, and I worked for a couple of different logistics firms. And approximately about 7 years ago, I started a company called CDL 1000, which for me, what our first thesis were, we need to digitize this first mile, the most complicated piece of supply chain, which again, getting containers,
that's getting the containers off
out
the
of the
boats
ports,
and right out of the port,
and getting to distribution centers.
Right.
So we started doing it, we digitized 54,000 lanes, and then we got a little bit lucky, and we started onboarding the biggest Fortune 500 companies as our customers. Again, from Walmart, Target, Home
Right.
Depot, and many, many other major
Customers are key, absolutely.
major brands started using it. So
Right.
so company base was one of the fastest growing companies